Every night at 1:31 a.m., I would wake up and see my husband standing beside my bed, staring at me while I slept. Until one night, I pretended to be asleep and heard what he was whispering to our daughter. If these stories mean something to you, please subscribe. Your subscription means more to me than you can imagine. It's motivation. It's the reason I keep telling these stories. And write in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's begin. The woman's name was Sofya Markova, and she was 67 years old. She was born in the spring of 1957 in a small wooden house on the banks of the Don River, not far from the village of Veshinskaya. She had lived a life so full, so heavy with memories, that if she tried to tell you even a small part of it, you might think she was making it all up. But every word of this story is true. Her nephew, a journalist from Moscow, set up a small video camera in her tidy living room. He wanted to record her stories while she still had the strength to tell them. Outside the window, the Moscow winter painted white lace patterns across the glass, but inside, the radiator hissed rhythmically, and the air smelled of dried apples and old photographs. Sofya Markova smoothed the worn wool of her skirt on her knees with a firm hand. She began her story not with the moment of her birth, but with a time of silence. A time when she would wake up in the darkness. To understand that silence, she said, you have to go back to the very beginning. She married Albert Nazirov in the fall of 2006. She was 49, a woman who had waited a long time for a family. He was 54, a tall, broad-shouldered man from a neighboring village, a tractor driver who worked in the collective farm fields. It was not a marriage for love, not the kind young girls read about in books. It was something practical, arranged by acquaintances over tea in a kitchen. He was a reliable worker, didn't drink, and kept to himself. Her brother, who had worked construction his whole life, simply nodded. A dependable man, he said. That's what matters. The wedding was modest. A simple dress, the village club hall, pickled food, and a bottle of cheap vodka. The women sang old folk songs, while Albert Nazirov stood there expressionless, never smiling once. Sofya Markova remembered looking at him during the registration ceremony and feeling a strange empty coldness, as if she were signing a lifelong contract of loneliness instead of a life with a man. They moved into a small house on the edge of the village. Whitewashed walls, creaky wooden floors, and a large stove that took up half of the main room. Albert Nazirov left for the fields before dawn. His boots crunched over the frost, and he returned long after sunset, smelling of diesel fuel and cold sweat. Sofya Markova's life became a cycle. Taking care of the small garden, feeding the chickens, mending clothes, and keeping the stove burning. Her daughters were born one after another. Diana Levinson was born during the brutal cold of January 2008. It was a difficult birth. The midwife, a dried-up old woman named Granny Marfa, had to struggle for several hours to bring her into the world. Sofya was 51 years old, and she held the baby while tears ran down her face, grateful for this late gift. 2 years later, in the summer of 2010, Stella Abramova was born. She had been loud from the very beginning. A fiery little girl with an iron will. Sofya was 53. And finally, in 2013, the youngest, Amalia Rubina, was born. A quiet, observant child with eyes that seemed to see straight through you. Albert Nazirov never said it out loud, but she knew he wanted a son, a boy to help with the hard work and carry on the family line. But God gave him 3 daughters, and Sofya Markova thanked God for every one of them. Albert Nazirov was a man carved from the same silent stone as the Don steppe. He never raised a hand against her, and for that she was grateful. But he also never gave her a kind word, a spontaneous touch, or even a simple gift. They were like 2 horses harnessed to the same plow, pulling the same burden but never looking at each other. He worked, she worked. They ate in silence. They slept in the same creaking wooden bed. There was no cruelty, but there was no warmth either. Just the slow, heavy flow of duty. Sometimes she would ask the other women at the village store while lowering their buckets into the same barrel of sauerkraut. Is this normal? They would laugh a little sadly. What did you expect, Sofya Markova? Romance? Love is for the young and foolish. Marriage is work. Be grateful he doesn't drink away his paycheck. One night, maybe in 2015, she lay awake staring at the dark wooden beams of the ceiling. Albert Nazarov slept beside her. His breathing was steady, a rhythmic rasp. She listened to the wind whistling through the cracks in the window frame, the distant barking of a fox, and felt a loneliness so deep it was like a physical weight on her chest. And this is all, she thought. This is my whole life? It wasn't anger. It was a deep, aching sadness that had settled into her bones and become as familiar as the wrinkles on her own palms. That was her life for 14 years. A quiet, accepted life filled with quiet, accepted sorrow. Until January 2020. That January she remembered forever. It was Tuesday, the 16th. The day had been completely ordinary. She woke up early, lit the stove, and cooked porridge. Albert Nazarov left for the garage. The girls, on winter break from school, played all day. Diana Levinson, already 12 years old, helped her mother with the chores. 10-year-old Stella Abramova was a whirlwind, always climbing trees and tearing her dresses. 7-year-old Amalia Rubina sat quietly by the window, tracing patterns on the frozen glass with her finger. They ate a simple dinner, boiled potatoes and salted tomatoes. Albert Nazarov smoked a cigarette while staring into the darkness outside the window. The girls went to bed. Sofya Markova darned socks by lamplight until her eyes began to sting. They went to bed around 9. She took her usual place on the left side of the bed near the wall. Albert Nazarov slept on the right side, closer to the door. It had been that way for 14 years. She fell asleep instantly, exhausted from the day. Then, sometime during the night, she was ripped out of sleep. Not by a sound, but by a feeling. That primitive feeling that someone is watching you. She opened her eyes. The house was pitch black, no moonlight, but slowly her eyes adjusted to the absolute darkness, and she saw him. A tall dark figure standing directly beside the bed on her side. Albert Nazarov. Her heart slammed wildly against her ribs. For one terrible second she thought it was a thief, a ghost, something from the old village stories. Then she recognized his silhouette. He was simply standing there silently, staring down at her. She was too frightened to move, too frightened to speak. She lay frozen, barely breathing. After what felt like forever, he silently turned and walked back to his side of the bed. He lay down, and within minutes his breathing returned to the steady rhythm of sleep. She never closed her eyes again that night. Her mind raced. Why? Why was he doing this? Was he sleepwalking? Had he gotten up to use the bathroom and simply stopped there? She tried to convince herself it meant nothing. The next morning she watched him carefully. He was exactly the same as always. Silent. Drinking tea. Eating bread with butter. She said nothing. But it happened again the next night. And the next. And the next. Every night she woke up and saw him standing there. She began watching the old clock on the wall, whose thin ticking became a countdown to her terror. It was always the same time. 3:10 in the morning. Always 3:10. Weeks flowed into months. February, March, April. By August it had been going on for more than 7 months. 7 months of this nightly ritual. She began losing weight. Her already thin frame became gaunt. Dark circles like bruises appeared beneath her eyes. The girls noticed. Diana Levinson, the oldest, asked her, "Mom, are you sick? You look so tired." Sofya Markova forced a smile and said she simply wasn't sleeping well. But she saw the worry in Diana's eyes. Sofya Markova began to think she was losing her mind. How could a person do this every night and then behave as if nothing had happened? She went through every explanation. Sleepwalking? No. Sleepwalkers don't stand in the exact same spot at the exact same time. A brain tumor? Some illness forcing him to do this in his sleep? She was too isolated to ask for help. The nearest neighbor lived almost 2 kilometers away. Her cell phone had no signal. To get to the village, you had to walk or wait for the rare bus. And what would she even say? That her husband stood over her staring at her at 3:10 every morning? They would think she was hysterical. A foolish woman. At the end of July, she noticed something that truly frightened her. It was no longer about Albert Nazirov. It was about Stella Abramova, her middle daughter, the fiery one. Stella Abramova had become quiet. She was losing weight too. Her cheeks, once round and rosy, had sunk in. One evening Sofya Markova found her curled up on the bed, staring at the wall. "Stella Abramova, what's wrong? Does your stomach hurt?" "No, Mama," the girl whispered without meeting her eyes. "I'm just tired." Sofya Markova knelt beside the bed and gently turned her daughter's face toward her. Stella's eyes were red from crying. She had been crying. A cold terror, colder than any winter wind, slid down Sofya's spine. This wasn't only about her anymore. Something was wrong with her child. And for the first time in many months, she stopped thinking about Albert Nazirov's nightly visits and truly looked at her family. They were all shrinking into themselves. All afraid. Diana Levinson had become too quiet, too grown up. Little Emilia Rubina clung to her skirt all day long. And Stella Abramova was fading before her eyes. That night, lying in bed waiting for the clock to strike 3:10, a new feeling overshadowed her fear. A cold, hard determination. She could not live like this anymore. She could not allow her children to live like this. Tonight she would not simply pretend to be asleep. Tonight she would become sleep itself. She would be so still, so calm, that he would think she was in a coma. And she would listen. She would finally hear the truth. Monday, August 12, 2020. She burned that date into her mind. This was the night. She spent the entire day in a state of hyper-awareness. She did everything as usual, fed the chickens, boiled water for soup. But inside, her mind was a silent scream. That evening she put the girls to bed early, kissed each of them on the forehead, holding Stella's face in her hands a little longer than usual. Then she lay down herself. She lay there tense, listening to the sounds of the house. Albert Nazirov went to bed at his usual time. The bed creaked. Silence. She forced herself to relax. She practiced breathing slowly and deeply. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She imagined herself as a fallen log, a stone, absolutely motionless. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drum she prayed he couldn't hear. She must have drifted off, because suddenly some sound pulled her back into full awareness. A creak. It was 3:10 in the morning. She kept her eyes closed, her breathing steady. She heard him sit up. The bed groaned. His feet touched the wooden floor. Then slow, measured footsteps. Creak. 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 They stopped. He was there beside her. She could feel the cold coming off him, the faint smell of machine oil and tobacco on his clothes. He stood there for a long time. Minutes. An eternity. Then she heard a quiet sound. He was lowering himself to his knees. He collapsed onto his knees on the cold floor beside the bed. And then he spoke. His voice was dry, cracked into a whisper so quiet that she had to strain every nerve to hear him. "Forgive me, Sofya," he said. "Forgive me." Forgive him for what? Her mind screamed with the question. "I was scared," he whispered, and his voice broke. "I was so scared. The debt, it was too much. I had no way out." "Debt? What debt?" 300,000 rubles, he forced out. 300,000. "I don't have it. And he'll kill me, Sofya. David Kaplan will kill me." David Kaplan. The name hit her like a bucket of ice water. He was a wealthy businessman from the district center, a heavy-set man who owned half the stores and had connections everywhere. A widower. A man who had everything. I promised him, Albert Nazirov sobbed. His body shook with silent, tearing cries. God is my witness, forgive me. I promised him our Stella Abramova. When she turns 15. I promised him, to cover the debt, to save my own skin. The world stopped. The words hung in the icy air. Each one was a physical blow. He had sold their daughter. Her Stella Abramova. A 10-year-old child. To a man old enough to be her grandfather, just to pay off a gambling debt. He kept talking. The words poured out in a desperate, tear-soaked confession. A card game in the basement of a private club in the district center. Losing money he had saved. Money they had saved together. Borrowing from David Kaplan and his associates. And then, the next morning, David Kaplan himself came to the house, found him alone, and made his offer. The debt would be forgiven in exchange for a promise. Stella's hand in marriage when she came of age. He was here, in our house. The thought felt like such a deep violation that it made her physically nauseous. I said yes, Albert Nazirov whimpered. I said yes because I'm a coward. I was afraid for my life. He made me sign papers. He recorded my agreement on his phone as proof. That's why I wake up every morning at this exact time. 3:10 a.m. The time when I signed my daughter's sentence. Sofya Markova lay completely motionless, but inside her a volcano of rage erupted. Every detail suddenly fell into place. Stella's fear. Her weight loss. Her silence. She must have overheard something. Maybe David Kaplan had looked at her in a way that made her skin crawl. Children know. They always know. Albert Nazirov stayed there for a long time, crying and mumbling apologies to God and to her. Then, as silently as he had come, he stood up, walked back to his side of the bed, and lay down. Within minutes, his breathing evened out in sleep. Only he could sleep after something like that. Sofya Markova lay awake staring at the ceiling. The first pale light of dawn began pushing through the frost-covered window. She did not move. She simply lay there while a plan formed in her mind. A cold, clear, terrifying plan. She rose quietly, like a ghost. She moved through the kitchen, lighting the stove, putting the kettle on. When the family shuffled in for breakfast, she was standing by the table. Her face was a pale mask. She looked at Albert Nazirov. He avoided her eyes. He knew. He knew she knew. She fed the girls breakfast. Then she turned to Diana Levinson, her oldest daughter. Diana, she said in a voice unnaturally calm, after breakfast, you and your sisters are going to Nina Frolova's place in town. You'll stay with her for a few days. The girls looked surprised. But Diana, sensing something dangerous in her mother's calmness, simply nodded. Sofya Markova packed them a small bag with their best clothes and a hairbrush. She walked with them 2 kilometers to the main road and waited beside them until the rattling bus appeared on the horizon. She hugged each of them tightly, holding Stella the longest. Be a good girl, she whispered into her hair. Mama will come for you soon. She watched the bus disappear into the distance. Then she turned and walked back to the house. Albert Nazirov sat at the kitchen table with his face buried in his hands. He looked up when she entered. His face was a mixture of fear and shame. I heard you, Sofya Markova said. Her voice was steady, empty of emotion. That was more frightening than any scream. Albert Nazirov flinched. Sofya, I can explain. Be quiet. She walked past him into the bedroom. From a high shelf behind old winter clothes, she pulled down a heavy bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it on the kitchen table. Inside was a hunting rifle. Her brother's rifle, left in her care many years ago. She checked it. It was loaded. Albert Nazirov's eyes widened in horror. Sofya, what are you doing? Put that away. Get the proof, she said, pointing the rifle at him with a steady hand. It was an absurd sight. A small, exhausted woman holding a large hunting rifle. but in her eyes was pure, deadly determination. He hurried to a loose floorboard beneath the bed and pulled out his phone. Shaking, he opened it and showed her the video. David Kaplan's face. Albert's broken voice making the promise. She forced him to send the video to her phone and then delete it from his. And now, she said, the rifle still pointed at him, you will stay here. You will not leave this house. You will sit right there. She pointed the rifle at a chair. I'm going to fix this. She put on her heavy winter coat and worn-out boots. She slipped the phone with the video evidence into her pocket, then stepped out into the cold August morning. The district center was 12 kilometers away on foot. She walked the entire distance without stopping. A small determined figure on an empty road. Her mind was empty, focused only on the next step. She arrived at David Kaplan's house, a large 2-story brick building with a tall fence and security cameras. She pounded on the gate until a frightened housekeeper opened it. I'm here to see David Kaplan, Sofya Markova said. The woman, seeing the wild look in the stranger's eyes, quickly led her inside. David Kaplan was in his office, a large room with a heavy oak desk and shelves full of books. He was a large man with a red face. He looked up in surprise when Sofya Markova was brought in. Sofya Markova, he said in a voice dripping with fake concern. What a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure? Without saying a word, Sofya Markova pulled out her phone and played the video. Then she drew the rifle and pointed it directly at his chest. His face turned pale. What does this mean? This video, she said, her voice now trembling with rage, will go to the police, the news, and everyone in this district if you do not do exactly what I say. David Kaplan's eyes darted from the rifle to the phone and back again. He was a bully. And bullies are always cowards deep down. He laughed nervously, stiffly. You think this changes anything? Your husband owes me money. You had a financial agreement with my husband. You have nothing to do with my daughter. She cocked the rifle. The sound was loud and final in the silent room. You will write a statement right now. You will confess that you forced this promise from a desperate man, that you targeted a child, and that the debt is cancelled. With trembling hands, he picked up a pen. Under her dictation, he wrote the confession. He signed it. Sofya Markova took the paper, read it, photographed it with her phone, and slipped it into her pocket. And now, she said, the rifle still pointed at him, you're coming with me. Where? To the police. Right now. You will tell them everything yourself. Or I will send this video and your confession to everyone I know before sunset. She led him out of the house and down the main street. People stared. The powerful David Kaplan, pale and terrified, escorted by a small fierce woman in a worn coat carrying a rifle. They entered the police station. Sofya Markova placed the confession and her phone on the desk. I am here to report a crime, she said in a voice ringing with strength. This man extorted a gambling debt from my husband and forced him to promise the hand of my 10-year-old daughter. The officer stared at the papers. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief and then to cold fury. Is this true, David Kaplan? David Kaplan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He simply stood there. A broken, pathetic man. The scandal was enormous. David Kaplan was arrested, and the story spread throughout the district. His business suffered. His reputation was destroyed. The debt was declared illegal. Sofya Markova walked the 12 kilometers back home. This time the road felt different. The weight in her pocket was no longer fear. It was freedom. When she returned to the house, the sun was setting. Albert Nazirov was still sitting at the kitchen table exactly where she had left him. He looked up at her. His face was a mask of terror and desperate hope. It's over, she said. She did not sit down. She walked into the bedroom and pulled out the same bag she had used for the girl's things. She began packing her clothes. What are you doing? Albert Nazirov stammered from the doorway. I'm leaving, she said without turning around. Diana Levinson, Stella Abramova, and Amalia Rubina are never coming back here. And neither am I. But where will you go? The debt is gone now. It's over. She stopped packing and turned to face him. She looked at this man, the man she had shared a bed with for 14 years, and felt nothing. No anger. No pity. Not even disgust. Only a vast, empty numbness. The debt is gone, she agreed. But you are still here. And I cannot live with a man who sold my daughter while she slept in the next room. She zipped up the bag. It's over between us, Albert Nazirov. Not the debt. Us. She walked past him, left the house, and never looked back. She walked through the darkness to the main road and waited for the night bus. She got on it. A woman with a small bag and an unbreakable, fierce will. She traveled to the city where Nina Frolova lived. She took back her daughters. For a while, they all lived together in a single small room in Nina's apartment. It was cramped, but it was safe. Sofya Markova found work at a local store. It was hard work, and the pay was miserable, but every ruble was hers. She watched her daughters begin to bloom again. Stella Abramova, especially, slowly came back to life. The hollows in her cheeks disappeared. Her laughter, uncertain at first, returned. She finished school and later entered university. She became a child psychologist, dedicating her life to helping children who had experienced trauma. Sofya Markova never married again. She said she had already had a family, and that was enough. She lived long enough to see her daughters become strong, successful women. She lived long enough to meet her grandchildren. And on the rare occasions when someone asked her about the most important moment of her life, she did not speak about her wedding day or the births of her children. She spoke about that cold August morning in 2020. The morning when a frightened, exhausted woman walked 12 kilometers carrying a hunting rifle to tell a powerful man. No. She taught her daughters and granddaughters one simple truth. You are not property. You are not bargaining chips. And a mother's love is a force more powerful than any debt, any man, or any fear. And when she said it, there was a spark in her eyes. Truth. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please leave a like, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to my channel. Stay strong and healthy. You can also subscribe to my Telegram channel, where we can share stories, discuss improvements, learn from mistakes, and simply talk together.